Good afternoon and welcome to the Senior Moment. This is Connie Clark with Home Helpers, and today we're going to talk about veterans benefits. November is Warrior Care Month, and we've got Veterans Day also coming up, and so I thought it very appropriate today that we talk about benefits for those who have served in the military. A lot of people think that if they did not retire from the military, that they are not entitled to benefits and services from the VA, but that in case is not true. And I've got two experts with me here today. Darryl Heisey, he's the Veterans Service Officer for Kootenai County, and Mike Ogle with the Vet Center over in Spokane. And we're going to talk about two different types of benefits today. We're going to talk about medical health care benefits offered through the Spokane VA and the CBOC, which is the center over here in Coeur d'Alene. And then we're also going to talk about disability and long-term care benefits. So let's start with Mike from the Vet Center. What services do you provide over in the Vet Center, and how is that different from the Spokane VA hospital?
The Vet Center is a VA facility. We're a separate entity within the VA. You're broken down into your health care, your benefits, cemeteries, and of course us. We're the smallest VA agency with 300 vet centers across the nation. Spokane is one of the biggest ones with a whooping 10 people. I also have 2 service officers on staff to file or help with disabilities, pensions, benefits, and myself, and then I have 10 therapists that work with post-traumatic stress disorder, military sexual trauma, bereavement for families, and we're a lot different than even with the hospitals in the fact that we do provide family counseling. So we recognize that when a soldier, Marine, airman, or sailor has some post-traumatic stress issues, it impacts the entire family. And those are all clinical social workers, so in fact, they do work with all the other VA agencies and community services for the veteran.
And one of the things that you had said in one of the other meetings that we had talked about, a lot of times veterans are afraid to say certain things. Once it gets in the record, everybody can see it and will affect things. And your records are a little bit different than that.
Well, actually, I can go into the VA system and see what's going on with their health care or other things, and ours are protected. No one can see ours except ourselves. We give total confidentiality when someone comes in. Of course, there are 2 exceptions, and one is it's okay to be suicidal, but if you have a plan, it changes everything, and the same with homicidal ideation. But typically, though, all veterans that come to the Vet Center have a safe and confidential place to come. And we do records, but they're not seen by anybody else, and they're sealed. If a person decides to file a claim, which I normally encourage, then they need to do a release specific to that, and then it only goes to the regional office for review. Other than that, our records are totally confidential.
And when we talk about veterans who can get medical care, anybody who has served and discharged honorably is eligible for medical care.
Well, and beyond that, you could have a general discharge. What we're looking at is non-punitive discharges for health care. All your benefits really, you qualify for under general discharge in most cases, except for probably GI Bill.
Which would be your education type
yes,
stuff.
And you need an honorable discharge in most cases to get your GI Bill. If you're medically discharged, you also get your full GI Bill regardless of the amount of years served, and of course medical retirement and some other, it varies, but typically though, most veterans with the general and higher qualify for almost all their benefits.
So all they would need to do is come into one of the VA offices or the service office here in Post Falls and fill out the paperwork.
Absolutely. The Kootenai County Veteran Service Office actually is doing lots and lots of claims. And when I see veterans from this area, more often than not, I refer them over here because of driving and stuff. But if they're over in Spokane, I encourage them to come in and see one of our service officers. And I think we all know each other. We kind of network. We're doing what's best for the veteran.
And it would depend when we get into talking about service-connected disabilities and stuff, if a person does have a service-connected disability, depending on the percentage of that, they could get health care for nothing.
Right.
Is that correct?
If you are 50% or more service-connected, your whole medical is taken care of for the rest of your life. The VA will take care of you. Now, that doesn't mean you can just walk into any doctor's office, but in the civilian sector, but the VA would take care of you. And also, if you're less than that, certainly the VA will take care of all your service-connected disabilities for free and any costs associated with that. Additionally, if you're on a low income, all your medical health care services are additionally they're free.
And that includes prescriptions also.
It
and
does.
Medical equipment
It
and
does.
everything that goes along with that. And we're talking about service-connected type stuff. And Darryl, that is your specialty, is service-connected disabilities. Why don't you explain what that is?
Well, first off, let me just kind of say what our office does. We're located over here on 120 East Railroad Avenue in Post Falls, and we're co-located with the Department of Motor Vehicles in that particular facility. And what we do is we assist veterans. Now, keep in mind, too, we're talking about veterans, and I also want to talk about the female veteran, ones or people who served, because a lot of times there's a disconnect with our female veterans out there. They don't feel that they're veterans
They don't
for some
think they're
reason.
veterans, yeah.
And so I just want to make it real clear that Mike Ogle over in the Vet Center, they see female veterans over there as well. If you served and you have honorable service or a general discharge, those services are available to you. And one of those services that the VA provides is the service-connected disability. And what that means is a person could be service-connected, and it could be for an injury they sustained on a baseball field while they were on active duty. It could have been an accident they were in while they were on vacation at home. It could be a war wound they received while in a combat area of operation. It could have been a number of things. It could be bad knees. It could be asthma. It could be chronic sinusitis. Those are different types of disabilities that people have that are recognized by the VA. If there's enough medical documentation that shows that it's a chronic condition, they can actually receive compensation starting at $123 a month all the way up to $2,800 plus a month for a husband and wife. So
and
it's
this,
a pretty
and
good
this
benefit.
wouldn't be necessarily if they were on the front line. They could be stateside.
Well,
and
yeah,
still
absolutely.
incur an injury, correct?
Absolutely. I'll give you a prime example. Did 21 years in the United States Army. I'm retired, and I have 2 bad knees. Well, I got that from repetitive marching, running. I mean, in the military, we do a lot of things. It's kind of like if you have a job and you get hurt on the job, the VA's service-connected disability is just like that on-the-job, benefit.
Good analogy.
So that's kind of how it works. So, people who have been diagnosed with hypertension or high blood pressure in the service. And there's other things that we talk about for service connection, the presumptive conditions for our soldiers and sailors and Marines and folks that were over in the Gulf. There are certain conditions that are presumptive conditions as well, and also for veterans who served in Vietnam, atomic soldiers who were exposed to atomic radiation. They may have disabilities that will be recognized, or they can be treated by the VA for those conditions. So there's a lot of different things that are, when we start talking about service-connected disabilities, the key thing is the evidence is what wins the claim. So if you have a veteran who served, some of the key questions we'll ask them is, do you have a copy of your military medical records? In many cases, they don't. So we have to develop a claim for them so we can provide, a person that has ringing in their ear, it's called tinnitus, and rushing, clicking, or ticking in the ear. Well, that can be caused from an acoustic trauma simply by firing weapons or being around heavy artillery. And those are disabilities as well for bilateral hearing loss or the tinnitus. And the VA recognizes that tinnitus disability at 10%. It's $123 a month. So there are ways we can develop claims for veterans, even if we don't have the medical evidence to prove that they were actually injured. We have to provide information or letters from friends they served with, or pictures that they may have. I'll give you a prime example. I have a guy who he had perfectly good hearing. Apparently, when he left out of the service, there was no actual in-booth type examination. but he had a picture of himself pulling the lanyard on a 155 howitzer. That was enough to win the claim for the hearing loss and the tinnitus. So, there's ways of doing it. And the VA is just not giving, they're just not giving this stuff away. There actually has to be examinations, and there has to be an opinion given to grant the disability. So that's what our office helps. We do the actual paperwork, because not a whole lot of people like to do the paperwork. So we do it for them. We enjoy doing it. Kurt Newmeyer and myself are over there, and we see thousands of veterans each month in the Kootenai County area. And my thing is, if they come through the door and they need help, they're going to get it at that office.
And that's one of the things that I think, having been through that system, that is frustrating, is having to gather all the paperwork and all the documents. And if they don't have their medical records during the time they spent in the military, they have to request them. So then they have to wait for all of that documentation to come in. If they have things like PTSD or traumatic brain injury, they have to go through your office, Mike, and get all the documentation as to what's going on with their life. And that's one of the frustrating things, is all the time it takes to build your case. And then once you submit your case, waiting for an answer, and then coming back and saying, okay, now you need this additional stuff. People a lot of times walk away and go, that's it, I'm done with it.
It's not always that bad. I mean, the VA is supposed to err on the side of the veteran. So when things are 50-50, they're always going to go the veteran's way. But some of these things are not going to be where you, on a physical exam, for example, tinnitus, the mere fact that you're working around loud noises. We got aircraft mechanics, like he said, artillery, people that fly aircraft. It's more likely than not that veteran was exposed to loud noises, and it's not they're going to grind them into a court case where they're going to have to prove it like that. It's not. It's just that more likely than not, because of his service, that a condition might have arrived. And there's also MS, diabetes. Sometimes there's presumptive periods where this stuff's going to be a delay and it won't show up for several years, and you can be connected for that just by the time span, knowing that it would have initiated in the military and you have that condition now. And I'm sure Darryl will talk more about that, but also presumptive conditions. Darryl was talking about that. A new one is gastrointestinal disorders for our Iraqi-Afghan veterans, or anybody that served in the Gulf, I should say. We know very little about the diseases and sicknesses and illnesses in the Middle East, and they're referring to those as undiagnosed Gulf War illnesses, previously known as Gulf War syndrome. We know what a camel tick does here. A tick does here, the effect on Lyme's disease, but we don't know what a camel tick would do over there. So within the VA, there's 3 offices staffed with numerous doctors, the closest one being Palo Alto, where when people have serious illnesses like that, we can send them. And even they don't have all the answers. So these presumptive conditions, we're seeing a lot of, like I said, gastrointestinal disorders are something that's considered at this time presumptive. So when a veteran comes in and he has IBS, certain other disorders, Darryl or myself or one of the service officers would file that, and they would be sent to an independent doctor to evaluate them by the VA, and the VA does pay for that to see how bad the conditions are, but that's automatically going to be connected, even though it's not in his military service record at that time. So, proof isn't always in the military service record. It'd be a timeline thing with what we call presumptive condition.
So when they shouldn't think that just because when they were discharged there was nothing wrong with them, and they may have had something wrong with them, but told the discharge people there's nothing wrong, just to get out quickly.
Yes.
Just because they were cleared when they were discharged doesn't mean that they can't file something now.
I think, in fact, probably most of the folks listening, when we're talking about senior things here, is going to be probably our Vietnam veterans. And I think Darryl can just rattle off the kind of a quick list of presumptive conditions for Agent Orange, which, as a matter of fact, has been opened up to Thailand, Okinawa, and Guam. So, they sprayed Agent Purple, Agent White. Those are open now. They've added ischemic heart disease. But Darryl, can you talk about those presumptive conditions?
Sure. There's there's a presumptive list, and when we talk about presumptive, it means by law, the VA, Department of Defense, and medical community has agreed that the defoliant Agent Orange and other disability or other things such as the atomic testing, radiation, and things of that nature. But let's talk specifically about Agent Orange presumptives. The Agent Orange presumptive is carried and is eligible. Veterans who are eligible for that are folks who are served in brown water sailors, who were in the river tributaries in Vietnam, or served boots on ground in Vietnam. The other piece to it is a veteran can be in Thailand or other places where Agent Orange was sprayed near the airstrips. That presumptive also falls under them as well. But the Agent Orange presumptives, the three newest ones we just had from of last year, are the ischemic heart disease, better known as coronary artery disease, Parkinson's disease, and hairy cell leukemia. The biggest one that we have is the diabetes type 2 adult onset, prostate cancer, lung cancer, tracheal cancer, larynx cancer, soft tissue sarcomas, about 24 of those, multiple myelomas. There's Hodgkin's disease, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. There's a couple others that are listed, but you can find these on the VA website at www.va.gov. That's www.va.gov. That's a great place to go, but you can also go to the Vet Center. They have a listing over there. If you're here in the Post Falls area, we have a list of those presumptive conditions on our countertop there. And let's talk a little bit about the service connected, where you said, well, they have to wait. We can put in, if it's a brand new claim and a veteran has not filed a claim before, we don't waste their time. We put them in for what we call an informal claim. That means that claim is good for one entire year. That means if they start to claim 5 or 6 months later, they can then at that point, they can be getting, once the VA makes the claim, makes a decision on the claim, they can get paid back to the date that we submitted the claim. So we can, if we think we have a good claim in that we can win, like a presumptive condition for Agent Orange or something, and we want to get the other records, we can go back and look at that, and we can put that claim in, and so they don't lose the time, they don't lose the money.
The time going through that process.
Exactly.
Very good.
It's a little bit more than that, too. If somebody just knowingly, because I work for the VA, wants to file something and they tell me about it, I'm kind of obligated to do an informal claim for them.
Oh, okay.
And so while they're gathering the stuff, it actually initiates their start date, which means they'd be back paid to the date, even though not all the other paperwork's been there. So that's real important, and Darryl knows the importance of that. So these little rules and facts and things, you don't get confused, folks. We got experts out here. We're not going to leave you hanging. We're here to help you, and you'll get the best service possible from Darryl, myself, or any of our local veteran service officers.
Absolutely. Well, let's take a break, and when we come back, we'll continue to this discussion. Thank you, gentlemen. And we're back to the Senior Moment. I'm Connie Clark, and I'm here with Mike Ogle and Darryl Heisey, and we're talking about veterans benefits. And one of the things that came up during the break was the question of, do you have to pay for those medical records when you get them? And gentlemen, what was the answer to that?
Well, most of the time, no. It depends upon how you approach the National Personnel Records Center in St. Louis. Now, our office can fill that form out. It's called the Standard Form 180, and it basically just all the information, basic information on the veteran. We fax it from our office. The Vet Center can do it. The VA Medical Center can do it. They can file that and say this is for VA benefits, and there should be no charge to the veteran at that point. However, if you have somebody that maybe the veteran has passed and now they're trying to look at genealogy. There is a fee for this through the National Personnel Records Center in St. Louis. Now, there was a fire in 1973 in St. Louis. The records that were affected in that fire were Army and Air Force records only. So people who served in the Marine Corps, the Navy, or the Air, or the submariners or submariners, you know, they don't, that their records are not part of that fire. So a lot of guys have been told over the years, oh, those were burned in a fire in 1973, and they're in the Navy. Well, guess what, guys? Your records are not at the NPRC. And by the way, they've been rebuilding those records ever since 1973. There's an actual triage office at the National Personnel Records Center in St. Louis, Missouri, that's all they do every day is work on putting those records together.
So if someone was told 10 years ago that their records are burned and they can't get them, is there hope for them?
Well, you know, as a matter of fact, just recently I met a World War II, Korean War Marine, female, whose records she thought were burned up and never did anything. And I went ahead and took care of that, and they all came in. She called me. She was excited. She didn't believe it. I mean, she was just astounded that you know, that little piece of information that I knew was that helpful to her. And in fact, it wasn't just for to help her with the claim or anything else. It was also to quantify the fact that she is a veteran. And Darryl said it right in the beginning that many of our women veterans don't feel they're veterans because they come back, raise kids. You know, when we talk in general, we're talking about guys. You know, you go to VFWs, American Legions, you know, if a woman veteran came in, more likely than not, they'd ask, hey, would you like to join the Women's Auxiliary?
Yeah.
And so, you know, all these little things that we've done over the years has led to that feeling. Well, women are veterans, and they are veteran strong. And as a matter of fact, every year I hold a Women's Veteran Recognition Day and or weekend, and it's the largest women veterans event within the Northwest. And I'll have 600 women veterans gathering. We'll discuss benefits, education, healthcare, have mammograms, massages, and just really cater to them for that very reason. Also, while we're talking about it, we do have Veterans Day coming up. You know, the largest event around here probably be the arena in Spokane. The event will start at 10 a.m. on the 11th, which is Armistice Day, or better known today as Veterans Day. It's always on the 11th of November, 11th day, 11th month, and at the 11th hour. But we start at 10 and we end on the 11th hour.
And something you all brought up that I was not aware of is when someone comes in to file a claim, it's important for them. You know, I talk to people all the time, and I say, go talk to Mike or Darryl. And they seem to think that they have to wait till they get all their records together to file, and then it's from that point on. But it's not. You said you file an initial?
Informal claim, yeah.
So once they come into your office and start talking to you, and you determine that they may have a valid claim, you file that for them. Is that correct?
Absolutely. And keep in mind that there's times where that will lapse. So if we get really close to the end of that year and we haven't received the records, I will always try and pull the veteran back in and say, we need to go ahead and formalize your claim at this time, and let's have the VA help us find your records, because they have a duty to assist in this process. And that means that the VA will schedule examinations on behalf of the veteran to determine how bad or how severe the condition is. They will go and get records from the National Personnel Records Center in St. Louis. They will try and obtain any other evidence that they may need. You know, we were talking about the discharge or the character of discharge, a bad conduct discharge, or an other than honorable discharge. In a lot of cases, those cases there, the VA will not go and receive or try and obtain stuff from the military police on that particular agency, or that, you know. So there's some research that has to be done, and so a lot of people turn to lawyers because lawyers get paid to do research. Well, our office does a lot of research. We're in a state of perpetual learning. There isn't a day where, when you say we're professionals or we're the experts, I'm not really sure that we're the experts. I'm just saying we know where to look, or we know where to get the information. that makes us dangerous, because the information that we give, we spout it out wherever we're at. And hopefully the things that, just like Mike was saying, here he's sharing with this Marine female veteran that hey, your records weren't burned in the fire. You're in the Marine Corps, so your stuff is good to go. And just that process of hope that he just provided to that veteran, we are in the business of assisting veterans where they live, what they're doing, how they're doing, and their families are part of that. When we talk about what Mike does over at the Vet Center with post-traumatic stress, a lot of times I'll send my guys and my gals over there because I know it's a safe place. I know it's a place where they're going to be taken care of. I know it's a place where they're going to have a listening ear. I know it's a place where they're going to be active and not proactive in that process. So when we talk about the VA Medical Center or the community-based outpatient clinic known as the CBOC in Coeur d'Alene, and there's one in Sandpoint, and there's one down in Pocatello, and there's others in other places in Washington State. We know that the Vet Center is one of those places where I will send folks who I know are suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. And there's hope for the veteran. There's so much help out there for our veterans that if they just go to the right place, and a lot of times they'll come into our office because they went into the Department of Motor Vehicles to go, what do you guys do in here in this veteran services? What do you offer? I'm like, well, everything that has to do with VA, we can help you with. And part of that is it's a network of care. It's a conduit. We're a conduit, and we're coaches for veterans, so they have somebody to talk to. The VA, along with the federal government, has made a law that stipulates that every state across the nation will provide veteran service officers to assist their veteran population in filing for VA benefits and claims. Therefore, a veteran should not have to do the claim on their own. The paperwork itself is basically like filing paperwork on going before a judge, and that's enormous. What it is. Yeah, it's a big deal. But if you don't understand it, we do it every day. Both Kurt and I have been doing this we're going on our 8th year, serving the Kootenai County veterans and the surrounding veteran population. In Kootenai County, we have over almost 15,000 veterans that we service out of Kootenai County. And we help other veterans that are just across the border here in Washington. We have some over in Montana. We have people that move or they're snowbirds and stuff, seniors, and they have the ability to do that, and they're in Arizona or California. We get calls from them when they receive paperwork from the VA. I mean, that's just one of the things that we're doing. And Mike travels an awful lot. I'll have him talk a little bit about what he does as far as traveling and being out there and being a voice to the vets, because the reality is there is help and there's hope. And even if somebody doesn't have a discharge that's maybe general, maybe it's other than honorable, we can help that veteran, we can help that individual to obtain the information they may need in order to get that thing upgraded. And the key thing to remember there is the further away you get from the flagpole, that means you're from out of the service on your discharge. If you have a other than honorable discharge, it's harder for it to be upgraded, but it's not impossible. And you'll never know unless you try. So that's what I'm just saying, is that there's that whole process of the OTHs and the assistance, service-connected disabilities. We haven't even touched on the non-service-connected pension information yet, but I would like to have Mike to maybe talk a little bit about what he does outside his office, because he's a traveling man and he's made a lot of stops along the way.
I know you two both are great advocates for veterans. You're a tremendous resource. Go ahead, Mike, tell us.
Well, a veteran never chose to be wounded, so therefore it is our premise, vet centers, that we go to them where they're at. They shouldn't have to come to us. We have a 40-foot motorhome. It's called a mobile vet center, and I go to rural communities in North Idaho, eastern Washington, far western Montana, and northeast Oregon to assist our returning combat veterans and ones that have been discharged even eons ago. We still have thousands of Vietnam vets living up in the mountains here. Ruby Ridge, Kellogg, all the way to Republic. It's never been said, well, there's never been a public apology, so I'm going to do it even though I didn't do it. I'm sorry to all our Vietnam veterans for what this nation did to you upon your return, because they really were spit up on. They really were called baby killers. They really were betrayed. And I think that, we need to reach out to these folks, and they are our heroes. Times have changed, but how unforgiving. Unbelievable they had to come back to this. And that's part of the post-traumatic stress, is a welcome home piece, which they did not get. I think we do a pretty good job of it now, but, sometimes I think they're words. I've got veterans, excuse me, that may be the only vet living in a small town in Idaho. And I want to reach out to them. People say thank you, but sometimes they don't really understand what they've been through. So when you're isolated and you've lived through the terrible trauma of war and you come back, life's not easy. So I find it, going out to these rural communities is real important. So we have an ongoing mission to provide counseling on certain days of the month in certain communities, and we're going to continue to do that. But with that, I do tons of other stuff. We do stand downs. We do ceremonious events to recognize our veterans. When I'm out there and there's no other service officer there, of course I'm going to take a claim. If they're near one of our normal VSOs, I always send them to them. I don't compete for that. It takes a lot of time. Folks, you do not want to do your own claim.
That's right.
You want a professional to do it for you, somebody that's paid to do this, and you don't need to pay them, because if anybody's trying to charge you to do a claim, don't do it with them. Seriously, we've got real professionals all over the place that'll do this, like Darryl. And when you do your own, sometimes you miss things. And there's other things like secondary issues with your original injury. Perhaps you injured your left leg years ago, and now your right leg's compensating, it's going out. That would be a secondary condition to your left leg. So, folks, it's real important to use a professional. And I'm also going to let you know that you're not alone. Post-traumatic stress is real. It's an awful thing to have, but I would rather you come in for help. And PTS is really not a disorder. A normal person goes to a messed up place, comes back, you're very normal for what you've been through. But really in post-traumatic stress, there's three areas that it's really broken down into. It's re-experiencing, which means nightmares, thinking about your wartime experiences, flashbacks, those type things. The other one is hypervigilance. You're not sleeping, some anger issues, hyperarousal, your heart rate's up, your panic attacks, and then there's avoidance. And avoidance isn't just avoiding crowds, which normally happens, but it's also that emotional numbness that we have when we come back, not having that loving feeling. And this results in isolation, and the worst part about post-traumatic stress is depression. So folks that isolate a lot end up having depression, and we know where that can lead.
And that affects their families. So their spouses and their children all get exposed to that, and it's really difficult for them to deal with it. And what happens is divorces happen. Now the veteran is by themselves, and it domino effects on them.
It really does. And, we call a lot of this, too, vicarious trauma. And that's where a family member who's been around somebody with this actually develops their own symptoms. If you're around somebody that's angry or very intense, you may be embarrassed to bring your friends to the house. And the same with the children. So it does impact everybody. And the goal is to treat the whole family.
And this isn't something new. They've named it different things, shell shock and all of that. Mm-hmm. And what's really interesting is I dug up some old letters from my great-grandmother, and my great-grandfather had it from the Civil War. I've got letters in there talking about it. So it's not something new. And I think the Vietnam veterans need to really be commended, because they have brought this to the forefront and made the government and the VA recognize that this is a condition. And it's not just, shell shock or something unusual. This is something that really happens. So our veterans coming back today really owe those Vietnam veterans a thank you.
They
for
do.
bringing this up.
Aristotle is really the first person that really wrote about it. That's how far back we
Wow.
know. But also, soldier's heart, as you're calling from the Civil War, shell shock to World War I, battle fatigue to World War II, to just plain crazy when the Vietnam vets came back. And that was a terrible label, but really post-traumatic stress. First vet centers opened in 1979. It was opened by Veterans for Veterans. The veterans wanted to be heard. The VA heard them, opened up a temporary solution to kind of keep them a little quiet, if you will. And they had peer-to-peer counseling. They had pool tables, It was a place for veterans to hang out. And after re-engaging and contracting another year, the VA said, hey, if you want to continue this program, you need to be professionals. So you need to go back and get that college education, that master's degree, that PhD. And unbelievably, all these veterans did go back to school. So, most of the vet centers are run by Vietnam veterans. So
That's what I was going to say. Most of your counselors are veterans themselves.
yeah, 90-some% of our counselors are veterans across the nation. And most of us are combat vets. So when you come into the vet center, more likely than not, you're going to be meeting with a veteran who's your counselor.
So you're going to talk to someone who understands, not just book learning.
Absolutely.
That's fantastic. One of the things that we're going to talk about when we come back from our break is non-service connected disabilities. We've done a lot of talking about things that are a result of your service in the military, but there's some things that you're eligible for if you weren't on the front lines. Is that
That's right.
correct?
That's right.
So we're going to take a break, and we'll be back and talk about that. Hello, this is Connie Clark again with the Senior Moment, and we're here with Mike Ogle and Darryl Heisey, and we're talking about veterans benefits. And one of the things that we haven't touched on is non-service connected. So it's someone who served in the military 90 days, had something other than dishonorable discharge. There are some things they're entitled to they don't know about.
Yes, and there's two different types. There's the improved death pension, which is for the surviving spouse of the veteran. And when you say the 90 days, at least during that 90-day period, there has to have been at least one day during a wartime period. It could have been like one day, and then the war was over. That would count as long as the time frame that they were on in the service. A lot of our World War II veterans, that's not going to be a problem because we're talking about almost a 6-year period there. And then we talk about folks who served in the Korean War. That particular time, we have people that are in between, and sometimes this benefit is not available to them. So we try really hard to see if there was something in their military background that we could go after a service-connected disability. In a lot of cases, we can do both the service-connected disability and a non-service-connected pension. And I'll talk a little bit about the non-service-connected pension, but the VA will only pay whatever the greater of the two benefits are. So let's say, for instance, a veteran gets 10% for tinnitus, or ringing in the ear, and his pension's $400 a month based upon his income. He's going to get the pension, and that's a monthly benefit. It's tax-free, and every year it has to be reapplied for. The way the pension works, there are different levels. There's the veteran by himself or herself, and there's a certain amount by law that's set forth. It's around $11,000 a year. So they can't make more than that. If they do, their countable income can be reduced by their out-of-pocket medical expenses. So actually today I'm going to be talking at Bestland in Coeur d'Alene about this very subject, about the non-service connected pension. Because we hear a lot of times, well, my husband has Alzheimer's, or, he's got this. And I actually had a lady come in the office. She says, my husband has old-timers. And I told her, I said, well, Alzheimer's, you mean? Yes, yeah, that's it.
That's what my mother used to call it.
Old-timers. And I said, well, okay. And part of that was, at that point, he was service-connected, but he really wouldn't understand the examination process. He really wouldn't try, we could try and go for a rating increase on a particular disability he had, but at this point in time, it would have been very difficult to win that claim for him because he wouldn't understand what's going on. So we are looking now at a non-service connected pension. Basically what it does is it's an amount of money that the VA can give to the veteran and or his family to help, and they can use it any way they want. It's not it's a needs-based benefit. Not everyone that applies for it qualifies for it. So it's very specific, age 65 or greater, or the person is under age 65, their income is below the set forth by law, the income threshold, and they are deemed 100% disabled by Social Security, disability, or whatever. So the VA looks at all of that, your income, they look at all of your out-of-pocket medical expenses. For every out-of-pocket medical expense you have, that reduces your countable income. So let's say, for instance, a husband and a wife, one of them is housebound. That means they don't drive, they can't get out of the house unless they're assisted or somebody comes and picks them up. And there's a lot of folks out there, as we get older, we have our driver's license are taken away from us, we can't drive, that freedom is taken from us. That literally means we're housebound, we're in our homes. And then there's the aid and attendance benefit as well under the same thing, where under the pension. And what we're talking about there is we're not talking about a physical disability that happened to you in the service. We're talking about something that now that we're older, we can't do the things we used to do. Aid and attendance is somebody who goes into nursing facilities, assisted living, things of that nature, and they need help getting out of bed, or they need help with needs of nature, things of that class for medical purposes. There's an examination that's done as part of our claims process that determines the person is either housebound or need for regular aid and attendance, and the amounts of money are much greater for the veteran and his or her surviving spouse. Now, keep in mind that the differences between the veteran pension and then the widow's pension, what we call the improved death pension, the dollar amounts are really small. It's almost embarrassing. We're talking around $7,900 a year for the surviving spouse of a veteran. If she doesn't have any income, $7,900 is still $7,900, and VA will pay that to them. But the minute they get a job, that $7,900 goes away. They get older, and as they progress and they don't remarry, they continue to receive this, what we call this non-service connected improved death pension. And so and as they get housebound, it goes up to around $9,000 a year for the surviving spouse of the veteran. And if they have aid and attendance, it goes up to around $13,000 a year. So you can see it's like, well, that's like less than $1,000 a month that they can't make that much money. But literally, we've had people come into our office. A couple came into my office several years ago, and I love the story because it's a World War II veteran, and he and his wife were together, and we started talking about health benefits. And I asked him, I said, well, how much money do you guys make a month? And he says, $725. $725. I says, how are you guys living? He says, well, we paid off our car. I paid off my house. We don't have any credit card bills. We live frugally. I says, how would you like to have a Christmas this year with your grandkids? The reality was that this benefit, they were in their 80s, late 80s. They could have been receiving this benefit for 20 years and never knew about it.
Oh, my goodness.
So when we talk about this non-service connected pension, it's better to apply for it or look at it earlier in life than it is to wait till it's too late, because it takes a long time for these claims to be worked and established by the VA as a credible or substantiable claim. So when we were done with their claim for this non-service connected pension, their income went up 120%, literally, overnight. It was amazing. So it literally changes their life. What we do in our offices literally can change people's lives, monetarily, medically, everything. It can impact that big. And so the non-service connected pension, when we talk about people are getting ready to go into assisted living, nursing homes, when you're going into assisted living, every dollar that you spend for that assisted living place is a dollar that can be used to reduce your countable income. And keep in mind, too, that it's needs-based. So if somebody has an extra $100,000 or $200,000 sitting in the bank, chances are this benefit will not be eligible. You'll not be eligible for it until you spend it down. Kind of just like Medicaid would be looking at all of that as well. for VA purposes, there is no look back. There is not a 5-year look back. Like Medicaid, there's a look back.
Right.
For the non-service connected pension, there is no look back. So we always say to people, if you've got a whole bunch of money, you might want to invest it or put it in a family trust where it's not showing as your income, and then potentially you, based upon your Social Security, you may meet that criteria. And it's set in the 38C Code of Federal Regulation to do that prior to filing a claim. Otherwise, the VA has to say, you make too much money, you have this trust. And so there's a lot of times when we talk about doing a claim out of my office, we believe in full disclosure to the VA. And we do that because that protects the veteran and his or her spouse from future, reprisal from the VA. Like, oh, we have an overpayment now, and they're put in a position where, financially they can't. That's why they received the pension in the first place, is because their income is so low. But it can become a place where now they owe a debt to the federal government, and they don't know where to go. Now, obviously, we'll help them with the paperwork to try and waiver that. But a lot of times, folks will be in trouble because they didn't fully disclose what money they had. If they sold their house in the process, that's an income stream, and automatically kicks them out of the non-service connected pension.
Now, when they come into your office, just like for service connected, when they say they're going to file that, do you file that initial claim for them so it would start at that moment, or do they have to wait till they get their paperwork together for the aid and attendance?
Usually with the pension, there's an examination that has to be done. As long as you do it within the month. Usually I'll give you some examples that happen quite often in the office. I will be talking to an adult child of the veteran. So I'm dealing with them instead of the veteran in a lot of cases. We go out to the facilities. I've been visiting all of the nursing facilities here in our area. I will go to the veteran just like Mike does. They're going to go where the veterans, if the veteran can't come to us, we're going to go to the veteran. And so we do that on Thursday afternoons, and that's kind of why I'm going to be at Bestland today. I'm going to be talking about these different types of benefits that are available, because the reality is it's available to them. They just have to know that it's there, and whether or not they qualify. So we have some pamphlets we can hand out. We have information at our office that discusses it. On the VA website, it talks about the non-service connected pension. And so there's a lot of different places to look for it. But a lot of people, when we're talking about folks who are World War II veterans, and we're losing them at a large rate here in America daily, that generation is the greatest generation. And, when I think about what they did, we're talking about they got on a ship and they went to the land, and they marched across the land and fought across the land, and they died across the land and got on another ship and then sailed to another piece of land, and they marched across that land, and they died across that land. I mean, you start looking at, and they did that for 4 years, many of them. And I'm thinking, wow, think about the trauma they experienced. But then when they got back, they were welcomed. They were hero welcomed. They came back on a ship, so they had some time to decompress. And but our Vietnam veterans were over there, and they weren't given the same opportunity. They were sent back home onesies and twosies, and they showed up with wearing their uniforms. And just like Mike was saying, they were spat upon. They were yelled at. They were cursed. And I love those guys. My uncle was a Vietnam veteran, and I love him. I joined the military because of him. He was a great man. And so when I think about what those guys did, what our guys are doing right now, my son-in-law, who currently is in the Marine Corps, he's an expert, explosive ordnance disposal guy, and he's in Afghanistan right now serving. And I tell you what, they're in harm's way.
Oh, absolutely.
But when they get back, that's when the work starts. And that's why we're here, is to help those guys and those gals get those benefits that they have earned because of their service to our country.
Okay, out there, if you know of anybody that needs any help or anything, Darryl, what's your contact information?
Well, they can reach me, reach the office at 208-446-1092. And that, again, I'll say it's 208-446-1092. And we're located here in Post Falls at 120 East Railroad Avenue in Post Falls.
Okay. And Mike, how would someone get in contact with you?
My number is 444 vets. You can remember that because I'm 4 vets 3 times.
Yes.
444 vets with an area code of 509 because I'm just across that Idaho border. So 509 444 vets. I also want to say that when we're talking about post-traumatic stress a lot with our World War II veterans, many of them do have it. It's just that when they came back, they were kind of told to shut up and color, go back to work. Things did happen inside those homes with those kids and the spouse, but things never left the house. And that was kind of the mentality back then. So I don't want to minimize that. And there's also what we call delayed onset. And that's most of our post-traumatic stress. You normally don't see anything till people have been home around 6 months or even later in life because you have more time than normal on your hands when you retire.
Right.
So you reflect back on your service. I think the worst are stroke victims who can't talk and they're sitting in a hallway in a chair and they have those racing thoughts. And when that happens, nightmares increase, quality of life decreases. It's important to come in.
Well, thank you, gentlemen, very much. And again, to the veterans, welcome home.